If you stack rank the things that are going to be responsible for the destruction of the American experiment, right? Number one is the fact that we let ourselves get fatter, sicker, more depressed, more infertile at an increasing rate while bankrupting the country.
Early in my career, I consulted for Coke to ensure sugar taxes failed and soda was included in food stamp funding. I say Coke's policies are evil because I saw inside the room. The first step in the playbook was paying the NAACP plus other civil rights groups to call opponents racist. What is going on with big food, and is it making us sick?
Cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease, obesity, autoimmune conditions. These are all going up, and they are all foodborne illnesses. And the fact that there is not clear communication about that from our medical leaders and public policy leaders, I think is the biggest scandal in America and the most dangerous scandal. We are being brought to our knees by metabolic dysfunction tied to food. 8 of the 10 killers of Americans, as I mentioned, some of them are directly tied to food. That also includes depression. Depression is skyrocketing, and as Chris Palmer at Harvard and some other prominent doctors are pointing out, brain conditions are metabolic dysfunctions. I frame it that way to kind of set the table that what's happening right now in America, where 30% of children have prediabetes, where insane. 80% of adults are obese or overweight, where 50% of adults have fatty liver disease and 20% of teens have fatty liver disease. You only saw this condition in elderly alcoholics just a generation ago. We're destroying our human capital and obviously our budget from something we're being told is complicated, but it's very simple. And it's taken me many, many years to come to this conclusion. And as I have through, being inspired by my sister and other leaders in the metabolic health space that we can talk about, I looked back early in my career, and I was raised with my sister kind of compulsively to get all the credentials. We're working for President Bush, working for, prominent politicians, Stanford, Harvard. My sister and I both went to Stanford, kind of going up the ranks. She became a doctor. I was, advising politicians and prominent food and pharma companies. And I think a lot of people, and I certainly was like this, kind of gets in that path and doesn't ask many questions. And reflecting back early in my career as I, worked in politics and then consulted for food and pharma, I found myself helping specifically Coca-Cola keep a huge portion of their revenue, which was food stamp dollars. $10 billion a year is transferred from the government treasury to soda companies. Whoa. $10 billion of money goes from food stamps to soda. To sugary drinks. And this is a nutrition program that 15% of the American people depend on as their core nutrition. It's called SNAP now, supplemental nutrition. There's no other country in the world that for their key lower income nutrition program, right, funnels that money to diabetes water, as I call it. Yeah. Sugar consumption among children has gone up 100x in 100 years, right? It's not a medical mystery why obesity, childhood diabetes, all these things are skyrocketing. It's because of sugar, but primarily it's because of a nuclear weapon to metabolic health, which is diabetes water, which is sugar water, which is basically a new invention. So we're subsidizing that, and Coke wanted to keep it that way.
What is the game exactly?
Yeah.
Is it manipulate the way that people think to get you to eat the most addictive foods, and so it's just a money-making scheme, or is there something else going on?
The biggest issue in the world, in my opinion, is the devil's bargain, where food is making us sick. We're getting addicted and it's making us sick. And then the medical system is profiting from the fact that everyone's getting sick. So taking the food companies, in a way, if you just take their interests, it kind of makes sense. And just diving in specifically to working for Coke, they want to grow their revenues, and they want to keep food cheap, and they want to keep it addictive. So you have that strategic imperative for their business, and then it's like, how do we do that? And it's very straightforward. It's how do we rig institutions of trust? So who are the stakeholders? The stakeholders are consumers. The stakeholders are lawmakers. So who do they trust? They trust civil rights groups, they trust medical organizations, they trust their schools, they trust their doctors, they trust researchers. So you literally just go down the list, and then it's very simple. It's like, how do we rig those institutions as much as we possibly can?
And when you say rig, what do you mean? Use them against the public?
Let's go into specific examples. So the tweet was about the NAACP. So prominent civil rights organization has done amazing things in American history. But right now, prominent organizations like the NAACP, like the Hispanic Federation, like other many other prominent civil rights groups are pay-to-play organizations. And this was as transactional as going to McDonald's and ordering a Big Mac. I, as a junior person, had the strategic imperative to racialize the debate around whether we should stop food stamp money going to soda, which was a bipartisan issue. It's not complicated, right? When you call someone a racist or a sexist, right, it shuts down the debate. So we call up the NAACP. That the PR firms have their number. There's a lot of partnerships, and you schedule a meeting. And it's not like we're going to evilly pay you, but it's like, hey, your constituencies, lower income African American children, like their Cokes. Here's the statistic, and they're trying to take that Coke away and trying to restrict choice. We'd love to do an honorarium, a donation, millions of dollars in this case. And would you marshal some of your allies, in various states and on the federal level to say that it's racist? What's trying to happen of restricting choice on food stamps? Sure.
So why isn't that actually true? Like, maybe that really is a racist thing to do, and maybe we really should be putting the brakes on it. I mean, obviously, I don't know that isn't what I believe, but I want to at least look at that angle and figure out, how do we know that isn't true?
It's important. In the tweet that went viral, I used the word evil. And I don't think, from being in the rooms, with, in this case, folks from the NAACP or other institutions we can talk about, I don't think many people are like truly evil. I don't think the head of Pfizer is evil. I don't think the head of, a research group that's doing, at universities that's doing fraudulent research is evil. But the system is evil. So let's just take your question here. The NAACP has the express mission of advocating for their community, which in their case is African Americans, particularly lower income and disadvantaged folks. The biggest civil rights issue in the country, the biggest social justice issue in the country, is demonstrably nutrition. Lower income American man dies 11 years younger than an upper income American man.
Woof.
This is because of one thing primarily. It is because their diet is on the lower income spectrum is massively ultra processed, right? It's from these ingredients: sugar, seed oils, and highly processed grains. And we can dive into all those three, but those literally didn't exist 100 years ago. These are, biologically just completely foreign
but
substances.
they come to be, so I think the fundamental argument is going to come down to, are they trying to get you addicted? Is the government subsidizing the foods that are most addictive? Or does this all start with good intentions and the government is trying to subsidize the calories that they think they can mass produce for the cheapest? Because when you look at, everybody thought we're going to hit some sort of population crisis and we're not going to be able to feed people and it's going to be, cataclysmic. Doesn't come to pass. We end up finding ways to make food cheaper and cheaper. So it's like, is the bargain, hey, we've made you really cheap ingredients, corn, soy, I forget what the 3R grains, corn, whatever. We've made these calories extraordinarily cheap. And by the way,
right,
we haven't punished the people that eat the cheap calories. We've made them extremely delicious. Now, what you and I know is Bummer City, that also ends up causing all this disease. And we're going to have to come face to face with that in a second. But first, I want to figure out, do we think this started with good intentions? Maybe does it even matter? But how do you think it began?
So I've become a student of this issue, and the answer is yes, it did start with good intentions, partly. So this started with Nixon. So when Nixon was running for president for re-election, food prices was a huge political issue. So it was a big political liability. It was like one of the issues of the campaign is fluctuating and increasing food prices. So he and hunger to some degree, but it was really around fluctuating food prices, which were being traced to hunger to some degree. So it was a big political liability for him. And also you could argue a public policy problem at the time. So that steered this modern ecosystem we have today of massive subsidies.
Do you know the moment where they decided what to subsidize?
Yeah, they decided to subsidize things that become shelf stable. Okay. So they could basically manage food supplies. So that was a shift. That was a decision to shift from whole food.
But as somebody that had to make shelf stable items back in my last company, it's really pulling the water out of the item. It doesn't have to be, I mean, it is going to be processed, but it doesn't have to be bad for you. So we just hadn't run the experiment and people didn't know what was going to end up?
80% of the 80% go right now. And I think a lot of this is not in quest to what I'm seeing is to highly processed grains, is to, enrich flour basically. So if you look at any, go to a gas station and pick up any processed food, the first ingredient, probably second and third, is some kind of highly processed grain. And the processing,
or sugar, quite frankly.
Exactly. So it's sugar, seed oils, and highly processed grains. It's actually miraculous what American ingenuity can do with those three ingredients. You take any food into some mixture of those things, and it's usually multiple sugars, multiple highly processed grains, and multiple seed oils, canola, soybean, things like that. So the processing of the grain means taking the fiber off, which, the fiber is what, number one, blunts the glucose impact of a whole grain, right? Number two, it's where a lot of the nutrition is, but it erodes, it goes stale. So the processing is taking that fiber off. So that's what the 70s with these good intentions basically did. They're like, we need these things to sit on the shelf for years. So we're gonna take that fiber off, and then we're gonna create these frankenfoods. And add them with a lot of sugar to make them more addictive. And I know you've talked to people in the past who've helped weaponize, and I think weaponize is the right word, our food system. This is one of the largest industries in the world, and they've got very smart people. And then as we've, basically subsidized and created more frankenfoods, and, since that time, ultra processed food has gone from well below 20% of our diet to now close to 70%. So the incentives and this emphasis started with good intentions, but I'd actually frame the question, like taking it today, is like, what is the biggest problem in the world today? The biggest problem in the country, like if you stack rank the things that are gonna be responsible for the destruction of the American experiment, right? Number one is the fact that we let ourselves get fatter, sicker, more depressed, more infertile at an increasing rate while bankrupting the country. I mean, we're 20% of, and I just wanted everyone to really focus on these statistics, because I think when we talk about the growth of healthcare spending, it's like our eyes gloss over. It's so common to hear this. It's like 20% of GDP growing at an increasing rate. Healthcare is the largest and fastest growing industry in the United States. Let's just step back.
That's awesome.
And think
Taking
about
care
that.
of people. It's one of those, I think part of why people, their eyes gloss over is healthcare is tied to, every one of my employees cares about their healthcare.
Right.
Every one of them on the way in wants to know, what are the options that we offer for insurance? People really care about this. And so what I think people miss, and this is where you really got my attention, is you're like, everything is about creating confusion.
Right.
And the goal is just to create enough confusion, whether I'm shutting you down because I'm calling you a racist and I'm saying this is problematic, or I'm funding a study that says, no, it's not, sugar's not the problem, genetics are the problem, or what's the most recent one, gas stoves or whatever.
Gas stoves, not what you're cooking on them.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like they're trying to create enough confusion so that this seems like a very complicated thing. And we're all missing the point that the reality is, and this is where I was like, we can't do this whole interview and me not ask the questions, even though I don't agree with them. They're even in the hardcore fitness health industry, people are like, a calorie is a calorie.
Right.
And that if you're saying that one calorie is better than another, you're out of your mind. So if it's if the people that are shredded and they look amazing and their whole focus is health, even they're pushing something that I'm like, at a cellular level, you are out of your mind.
Right.
Then you understand how confusion ends up taking over this whole argument.
So it's been an amazing journey the past couple months. As I said, I was born and raised in DC, started my career there. I've met with 50 members of Congress and senators on this issue, actually. Some of them have DM'd me. I've been doing a lot of work in DC. And I think even with them, very well-intentioned, they have kids, they see the massive metabolic dysfunction, prediabetes, obesity among their children. They're very worried. But just to paint a picture, sitting with members of Congress, they don't even understand the concept fully that they're playing the game that's been created for them, where both parties are debating how to increase access to the system that's creating destruction. I run a company too, and healthcare is very important, but everyone's concerned about access to a system that is causing violence. And my framework on this—
You have to explain that.
My framework on this is I think, how we've been gaslighted. When you can think of any medical miracle, what would you say a medical, just what comes to mind when you think of what's really propelled life expectancy in the last 100 years?
Antibiotics.
Great. So antibiotics is a solve for an acute situation. It's something that's going to kill you imminently, that infection. You take it for a week and you stop using it. Any medical, I would argue, anyone can think of or name that's really propelled life expectancy forward is for an acute situation, complicated childbirth, emergency surgical procedures. Giving birth 100 years ago for a woman was more dangerous than having breast cancer today.
That's crazy.
An appendicitis, a gunshot wound, these medical miracles. And, if you have a burst appendix or you have something that's going to imminently kill you, we have a miracle medical system. Unfortunately, today, what's happened is we've taken that trust and we've asked people to trust the medical system on chronic conditions. So now 90% of healthcare costs plus are on managing chronic conditions of people that are already sick. And what's happened, the more statins we prescribe, the more heart disease goes up. The more metformin we prescribe, the more diabetes goes up. The more SSRIs we prescribe, the more depression and suicide go up.
You have to be careful with that one. So, because that isn't causative, right? It's not like we don't know, I suppose, but it's certainly the studies have not been done that say that the more statins you prescribe, the more heart disease goes up. But there certainly is a correlation that we have not managed to reduce the incidence of that. But there's one thing before we get lost in that I want to say is that the thing that I think people are missing about healthcare is that it isn't healthcare, it's sick care.
Right.
And so the whole system is designed, hey, something is making you sick, which is great for business if you're in the quote unquote healthcare industry. But the hypothesis I would put down, and I know that you would put down the same one, is the thing that's making you sick predominantly, there are probably other problems as well, but the thing that's making you sick predominantly is what you're eating. So you're eating something that's making you sick in this really chronic, slow, gives us lots of symptoms to treat with lots of medication that you have to take every day. And that's great for business. And so now you've got insurance companies that the only way for them, because there's regulations, the only way for them to get their bottom line to go up is to get more sick people, because they have to pay out all but 15% or something.
That's right.
So they're hemmed in from how they can make money. Oh, if more people get sick, amazing. So while they're not necessarily driving the food industry, they probably aren't doing their best to lobby against the things that are happening to make certain things cheaper, because those things are making us sicker, so on and so forth. So if people switch it, and we called it like sickness management, and then we had preventive healthcare, then I think there would be people would approach us with their eyes open to the real problem.
You would never design a system. You'd never come down, as an alien, come down to Earth and see 80% of adults having obesity or being overweight, 50% diabetes or prediabetes rate among adults, 93% of Americans metabolic dysfunction, which is driving, 90 to 95% of all healthcare costs, 8 out of 10 leading causes of death. You'd never say, let's wait for everyone to get sick and then give them an incremental pill. One thing I'd push on a little bit is that I think we put nutrition and lifestyle habits in this niche preventative box. When my sister, Dr. Casey Means, was at Stanford Medical School, and a patient with debilitating migraines and depression and hypertension, she mentioned maybe they should look at their diet. The attending surgeon said, "Don't be a pussy," and said, "We did not go to nutrition school. We do serious medical interventions here, which is through a prescription pad or through a surgical intervention." That is the predominant mindset in American medicine, right? Doctors aren't nutritionists. There's 90% of doctors graduate without one nutrition class. 80% of med schools in the United States to this day, Stanford, Harvard on down, don't require a single nutrition class to graduate.
That is scandalous. But it's scandalous. This is where it points to something other than evil. This is just moronic.
Well, I think the system is evil. I don't think the dean of Stanford Medical School is evil, right? But when Casey was there, the dean of Stanford Medical School was a pain specialist, Dr. Pizzo. And the lifeblood of medical schools, right, is funding and research funding, and the vast majority of that comes from pharma. So when he was dean of Stanford Medical School, Dr. Philip Pizzo, he accepted a multi-million-dollar donation from Pfizer and other leading opioid companies, okay? And they built a new center. And then he was appointed to the NIH panel to make, in 2011, I believe, to make opioid guidance. And he appointed 90% of the people that he brought on that panel also had conflicts, not just with their research funding, but personal consulting payments from opioid companies. And they created more relaxed opioid standards. And today, when you hear about the opioid crisis, 80 to 90% of people that overdose and die from illicit opioids, that started with a legal prescription pad. So it's all very nice, but like that's how the system works. So it's like, is Philip Pizzo, who's still at Stanford, is he a terrible person? I don't think so, but I do think it's a lack of moral clarity and frankly, a lack of leadership that they don't call this out. You know, I have talked on this journey to leaders at, you know, Harvard Medical School, to leaders at insurance companies, to leaders at pharmaceutical companies. And they're aware of what's going on, but there's plausible deniability for everyone in the system. So I do actually think, and you know, I'm advised, you know, everyone likes their doctor not to attack doctors. And I think doctors by and large are doing great work on an individual level and trapped in a bad system. But I will say this, I think anyone smart in these systems, I think understands what's going on. And it's not, just going back to what you said real quick, it's not that we need to stress, I don't like this bucket of prevention.
That's interesting. Why?
Food is the best reversal. It's the best reversal. So let's just take
an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
But I think we put food in this niche. It's very important for prevention. We should be, if we were creating our healthcare system from scratch, we'd be paying.
You just want them to also use it instead of drugs for curing somebody.
I'm asking the medical system to trust the science. Take somebody with Alzheimer's, take somebody with depression, right? Take somebody with other conditions. Let's take those one by one. Alzheimer's is now called type 3 diabetes. The book, The End of Alzheimer's, a lot of research coming out of major universities, by far the most efficacious way to reverse, you can actually reverse dementia, is a rigorous food and lifestyle intervention. And you know, a lot of people in the medical system throw up their hands like, nobody's going to do that. No patients are told that. I have yet to meet a person whose parents are dealing with Alzheimer's who's even been mentioned that from the doctors. It's not in the standard of care. You know, we propel government money, tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, per patient, per Alzheimer's patient. We could pay those patients to exercise. Like, there's public policy means to promote what is the best medicine. Depression, 150 minutes of moderate exercise, zone 2 exercise, like light exercise, for 3 months consistently, 150 minutes a week, is, according to peer-reviewed academic studies, is more effective than SSRI, the leading antidepressant, with less side effects. Psychologists aren't telling that to patients.